Hi, I'm the Malt activist, and today we're going to be talking about a distillery that I've had this irrational fascination for the longest time. I don't know why, but I do. It's a distillery in Campbeltown. I think you might have heard about it. It's called Springbank. That's right. I've had this infatuation with Campbeltown whiskies for such a long time. Springbank is a wonderful distillery in Campbeltown with an extremely unique distinction. It produces 3 different kinds of whiskies using exactly the same equipment, i.e. the same wash and spirit stills. It has 3 stills which are used to make Hazelburn, a light floral whiskey, Springbank, a sort of mildly peated, slightly heavier, oilier whiskey, and of course Longrow, which is the most peated and an extremely heavy and oily whiskey. They use exactly the same equipment to make these 3 different types of whiskeys, and it's really down to the cut and the way the spirit is distilled in order to achieve those results. What I have here in front of me is the new Springbank 13, the green edition. It's in this little sample jar here. I don't have the actual bottle. I used that up for a tasting that I conducted a couple of days ago, and this is the only bit left. So this is going to have to do. I'll take about half of this. Yeah, that should be enough. So the cool thing about Springbank is that it is the only spirit that's been distilled 2.5 times. Hazelburn is triple distilled, Longrow is distilled twice, but Springbank, only whiskey in the world, has the distinction of being distilled 2.5 times. So how do they do that? They take spirit from the first still that's been distilled, then they take spirit from the second still that's been distilled twice, and then they basically mix that spirit together and they distill it 1 more time. So there's some spirits in there that's been distilled 3 times and some spirits in there that have been distilled twice, making the aggregate spirit distilled 2.5 times. I think what this does is it imparts not only just the fruitier, floral, lighter tones, but also manages to capture some of the slightly heavier, slightly oilier tones. So Springbank as a whiskey sits pretty much in between Hazelburn and Longrow. I'm not a big fan of Hazelburn whiskeys. I find them to be too weak spirited for some reason. Springbank I really like, and Longrow are one of my favorite whiskeys, and they've been doing some amazing stuff lately. The whiskey at hand, this is a 13-year-old, matured exclusively in sherry casks. There's not a lot of information about this that I've been able to find, just some stuff on their website which just says, matured for 13 years in sherry casks. Doesn't mention what type of sherry casks either, so I'm going to leave you to research on that. In the meantime, let's have a taste of the spirit. Immediately slightly peaty from what I could get. Nice barley, which is like a trademark Springbank flavor profile. Just really good crisp barley, which speaks volumes of the distillate really. This has an ABV of 46%. I personally prefer my Springbanks at a much higher strength. I'd really like their 10 and 12-year-old cask strengths, but 46% does the job quite well as well. Why is the box green? Well, it's to show that the barley used in the production of this whiskey was an organic barley. And that's pretty much all the information I have, other than the fact that 13 years sherry cask. Anyway, I had this at a tasting a few days ago, so literally I have no notes written down, so this is just going to be on the fly. It's quite sweet, thanks to the sherry obviously. Touch of smoke, can get fruity after a while. More apples and raisins. The barley is also really nice and crisp, I like that. It's one of the more sweeter Springbanks. I think 13 years in sherry casks will do that to you. The bourbon cask Springbanks, quite savory, much more earthy. Though this also has a slightly earthy, mushroomy character to it as well. a little bit of wet wood. It's a little understated. I would have liked it to fire a little more, but that's fine. I mean, nothing wrong with that. I get some vegetal notes as well. Some greens, grass, wet grass, maybe even cucumber peels. It's quite fresh, with a little, what I'd like to call warehouse dust. I think the nose is quite decent. It's not magnificent. Some melons now for some reason, as it sits. So I've had this for about 15-20 minutes now, and the nose was a little sharp in the beginning, but it's mellowed out, and I think this is probably its true form, and I quite like it this way. So overall, not a bad nose. I like it. Okay, so a little underpowered on the palate. It retains some of its fruitier notes that I found on the nose, but they're a little subdued. It's almost as if they're a little diluted and not up to strength, and I don't like that. I think the palate is a little one-dimensional, not as good as the nose. The finish, okay, I'll get to the finish in a bit. I think I'm going to do palate one more time. Quite savory on the palate, some dry cardboard, touch of oak. I would have liked this to be sweeter. It's not. The finish is medium, with a bit of oak, something mentholated, could be mint leaves, and just a touch of spice, but not a good spice. It's more like an acrid sort of sharpness to it. So, as always, I'm biased towards Campbeltown whiskies, only because they offer something to me that is different from the other regions. And Springbank is a great example of that, and this particular whiskey is also a good example of that. Unfortunately, it's not a very good example of a good whiskey. I think this is average at best. I wish this was a little more sweeter. I think maybe a couple of percentage points on the ABV would have helped the flavors come out a lot stronger. It's not completely balanced in my opinion. I've had better Springbanks, I'll be honest. Do I recommend this? No. Do I recommend this as a gift? No. But if you're curious, sure, why not? I'm the Malt Activist. Subscribe now if you want to get more updates on video reviews and other whiskey related videos that I do. Follow me on Instagram, Snapchat if you're 13 years old. Don't follow me. And of course Facebook, where I do most of my conversations. Until next time.